So the next session is about Advanced Materials Initiative 2030. And my name is Lars Montelius. I'm a professor emeritus here at Lund University. I also was engaged quite heavily the last 2 years regarding this AMI2030 initiative. And some of you may know that the first discussions was principally held 2 years ago in the Euro Forum that was held 2021 in Portugal, when Portugal was leading the EU presidency. And then I was the Director General for INL, and INL was the entity that was selected to host that event. And now it's Lund University that has been selected to host the event under the Swedish presidency. So I think the time is coming back to each other, so to say, and these initial discussions resulted in a discussion with Maria Gabriel in a panel discussion, or started there. And then she thought these ideas were so good that we should bring something more solid. And out of that solid came the manifesto, which was published in January 22. And then out of the manifesto, which principally says that there is a need for a systemic change in Europe to do something really different in order to keep the competitiveness, increase the number of works in Europe, and retake some of the value chains that have been lost to other continents. And this systemic change is really very simple. It's only to work together for the people, us, for the planet, and for prosperity. So it's rather simple. There is a strategic vision in this manifesto that you can read, and I can assure you every single word of that statement is selected, carefully discussed over weeks before we defined it. And it's still very valid. What was happened after that was that we invited 4 European technology platforms to work with us in order to develop a roadmap. How could this kind of advanced materials initiative actually continue? And there were 4 technology platforms, and in Grenoble last year, it was presented the strategic roadmap. And then in the autumn, we worked on the strategic research, strategic innovation agenda. And then now we're here. And we started with, I would say, 8 institutions coming together talking. And now we have a little more than, 40-something organizations?
370.
370 organizations?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's exponential scaling, right? And I think this is because I think this really touches all. This is really important for the future. We are at a tipping point. We need to do everything sustainable. We need to change the way, and we need to take the possibilities to make an accelerated development by using all the different tools available out there. So this was the short introduction. This panel session have a number of very important people that will present all the details about this. And the very first one is Philip Jack, standing here with me, who is the coordinator of the AMI2030, and we have been working heavily with each other. So please, Philip, the word is yours.
Thank you very much, Lars, for this kind introduction. Yeah, so indeed, we have been working quite a lot over the last year or so, a little bit more than 1 year. I think the first time I heard about this initiative was somewhere in October or November 2021, so just before the manifesto was released. And so I think there was already a lot of things that was said, so maybe I should introduce a little bit more myself. As Lars mentioned, my name is Philippe Jacques. I'm the Managing Director of EMIRI, which is the Energy Materials Industrial Research Initiative, which is one of the 4 platforms which has been really trying to articulate really the vision that was brought in the manifesto into something more concrete. I think we heard now about what is intended to be in the coordinated action plan for advanced materials. And again, that's definitively what we are trying also to anticipate, really to be able to come with something that will be articulable, that will be really implementable at the European and member states level, so that really we are able to achieve this vision of really accelerating the development of advanced materials toward the circular economy. So I will go very quickly on this one because I think that was mainly what you just reminded Lars about the really the what was triggering really the Advanced Materials Initiative. That was the publication of this manifesto, and again the idea is really to bring everybody together. And but when I say everybody, it's really everybody on the different dimensions of the map, from blue sky research up to really the markets and the citizens, but also all the communities which are involved in the design, development, production of materials, those who are integrating, processing, transforming these materials and integrating them into articles, components, device, and at the end systems, and also all those who will have to recycle them at the end of the life of the products. And this along all the different strategic innovation markets that really need to be considered. So as Lars pointed out, today we have a little bit more than 370 organizations who have been joining the initiative on our website by really expressing the interest really to contribute to the shaping of this initiative. And more than 600 individual experts who are really contributing to the work of the different working groups, which have been working first on the strategic agenda, and more recently we have been working more in a, let's say, in a more restricted, with a more limited amount of people on really elaborating what we call our strategic materials agenda. It's not yet a strategic research innovation agenda in detail, but it's much more trying to give the way to on how really we should go really to implement really the ambition. And it was discussed a lot today about urgency, speed, and definitively that's what we want to tackle. We want to provide an accelerator that will really bring together the different sectors, the different stakeholders that need to be aligned really to achieve really this ambition by designing, developing, and uptaking safe and sustainable advanced materials towards a circular economy. So this tagline is really summarizing what we want to do. Really, that's multi-sectorial approach, and multi-sectorial is not only about markets, it's also, as I was mentioning, bringing together the research community and the industry. It's also bringing together all those who are really active on the different segments of the materials value chain. We want to work really on the acceleration of the design, the development, and most importantly of the uptake. It was mentioned a couple of times already today about this valley of death issue. So how really to translate, I think we all agree that we have really great research skills in Europe, but we are still fighting with how to translate this one and to transfer this research into business, and to bring it on the market. And that's definitively what we want to tackle here. Sustainable on this slide means also safe. And in the very last version of this presentation, we have again put safe and sustainable just to make it very clear that we want to address also this goal of the Green Deal, which is about net zero pollution, and really addressing really, even if we need to accelerate, we need to make it also keeping in mind really the values of Europe, which is about safety and health for all the citizens. So that's, of course, very, very important. And of course, the ultimate goal, and I don't want to insist on that, it's about really being able to achieve this circular economy, how to really to close the loop, really to be sure that we will be able to develop material that at the end will be recyclable and that will feed again the loop, so that we are not going to continue spending the resources that we don't have at the end on our planet. we try to put here on this slide the playground. So first of all, we feel that there is no way not to consider the whole circular value chain for advanced materials. So we just here illustrated in 4 main segments. The one dealing with the discovery, design, development, and production. Then its transformation and integration into products, component systems. And then the use phase of the products. Generally, when we are using our smartphone, we don't care about what are the materials that we have in hand, but we have materials in hand, and these materials are providing the functionalities of the device. And at the end of life of the product, we need to care that we will be able again to manage this end of use and to bring back the materials to feed again a next generation. On the bottom of this slide, you have the 9 innovation markets that have been identified as being really strategic for Europe. So maybe it's too small to be readable from where you are, but also I will list them again. So it goes from healthcare to electronics, covering also construction, energy, transport, home and personal care, packaging, agriculture, textiles. So indeed, that's a very broad and very diverse needs, but we feel that even if it's diverse, there are commonalities, there are common needs that really could be addressed by a strong and coordinated innovation strategy that really would benefit to all of these different markets. And in the middle of the slide, you have the 3 main levers that we have identified really to deal with really the ambition of accelerating really the development and the uptake of the materials by first dealing more with digital technologies for materials. The second one is also when we will be developing materials to do it in a very parallel way and hand in hand with also developing the appropriate technologies dealing with production, processing, characterization for these materials. And all that, of course, need to be done also in very close alignment with anticipating really the policy and regulatory framework, providing also the tools to implement these frameworks, but also anticipating the needs. There was this question about how to calculate circularity, which I think is indeed very obvious. But when you dig into the practicalities of it, there are still, I think, a lot of standards of guidelines that need to be aligned and to be developed. Still methodology that really need to be translated into some kind of a certification of standards so that at the end we are sure that we all speak the same language. So still a lot of work to be done on that side. So regarding these cross-cutting needs, we've tried to summarize them here on this slide. So first, the cube between the advanced materials, which are of course on the front end for us, because that's really our, let's say our focus. This one need to be systematically connected with the needs of the markets, and also keeping in mind that materials are not developed in vacuum, but that really they need really to, at the same time, to make sure that we have the appropriate technologies for developing them, for producing them, for transforming them, and at the end for recycling the advanced materials. As to the needs, the cross-cutting needs, for sure, safe and sustainable is a must. We don't want to come with a dead-hand solution that will generate new issues for the next generations. And otherwise, apart from that, which is really this one is really cross-cutting and covering all the activities that need to be done. We have identified 5 main needs. One is about developing materials which are more resilient. That means materials which are less dependent on critical raw materials, or possibly even not relying at all on dependent on CRMs. Another need is to we to make sure that we still develop and provide materials which are more efficient regarding the resources which are embedded into the materials, and also the resources and energy which is needed during the use of the materials. We need, of course, materials which are circular. That does not mean that we will find the very magic additive that make every material circular, but we need to have this by design approach, so that to make sure that the new solution, the new material that will be developed will be much easier to recycle than the one we have today. We need also to get rid of these fossil-based materials. This was mentioned already a couple of times today. So relying more on biosourced materials, and really also, let's say, letting nature making the job for us regarding closing the loop, when every time it's possible really to have a material that will be biodegradable in a way which is totally safe and sustainable. And last but not least, we want also to address the what we call the frontier materials. So these materials which are not yet mature enough really to have identified the appropriate best applications on the market, but for which there is still a need really for efforts and for continued research and development really to have these materials really expressing the full scope of their potential. And so we are mentioning graphene was mentioned a couple of times already. I think this one is an obvious frontier materials for us. And if we succeed really in addressing these cost-cutting needs, we will contribute to the main objectives that are summarized on the bottom of the slide, which are really about reinforcing sovereignty autonomy, really to reinforce also industrial competitiveness, but also addressing, supporting the Green Deal, and really also the transition toward the digital age that, of course, is an important one also. For this, we have identified 8 main categories of actions where really we want to launch activities. So leveraging more on game-changing technologies. I mentioned digital, that's an obvious example, really that will really allow for faster development of advanced material solutions. We want, of course, to focus on the technologies and developing the technology that will really reduce the environmental footprint, that will also facilitate and develop the circular business models. An important aspect that was, and I was very happy to see it also already in the draft version of the coordinated action plan, it's about really supporting innovation uptake and the access to infrastructure and services. Technology infrastructures, I think, is a great tool, and the very introduction that we had today about the ecosystem you have here, I think I would dream to have such an ecosystem in every region of Europe, and that's definitively something that is on our agenda, really, to identify how really to better position this excellence center and technology center that really will allow also startups and SMEs really to have access to the facility they need really to scale up, to mature the technologies up to a level where really industry will be ready to take over. The aspect about, of course, outreach, dissemination, further exploitation, this one is a no-brainer. We want, of course, to contribute to this implementation of the regulations, norms, and standards by challenging also the regulators, so that really they really address the right way, the problems in the right way, that we provide them also with the appropriate frameworks, with the appropriate tools, guidelines, really how to really to measure really the KPIs that they will set up, and also anticipating when we talk about accelerating globally the development and uptake of materials. We need also to anticipate and to really to make sure that we will be appropriately anticipating and measuring also the possible risk that these new materials would bring on the markets. So there are already a lot of work which has been done, for example, on nanomaterials, and what the Malta initiative has been doing, for example, is, I think, something that really we want to rely on in the future, really, to make sure that we will be not stuck with new material just because the regulations and the guidelines, the test guidelines would not be available really for correctly assessing the risk connected with these new materials. And education and skills, that's of course super important. We are in the year of skills, and I think that we all know how important it is really to attract talents. This will be done really by developing this ecosystem, and international cooperation, of course, needs also to be addressed on appropriate topics. And I will quickly close on this one. Really, what we want to do is really to have this this initiative that will be connecting all the dots between the different level of funding in Europe, that will be aligning, contributing to the alignment of really the policies at the European and member state level. We are really calling for this cross-sectorial partnership on advanced materials. We would like really to have it as a co-program partnership, because we want industry to be really heavily involved and also committing really to deliver on the objective of the partnership. So what we have been doing so far is really to list and to identify and to start talking with I would not say a few, but quite a huge number of different initiatives which are already in place on the EU arena, EU RNI arena, and definitively, so we have initiated these discussions. The initiative is very welcome, and most of these initiatives are really willing to contribute. Our goal is not to coordinate what they are doing, it's to connect the dots. That's exactly what you were saying, Lars. We want really to become this, let's say, central forum where really all these stakeholders will be able to align their strategic agenda, to agree on what should be done together, and to do what will be beneficial for all of them. And I think that's it. And sorry, I think I was a bit long.
Thank you very much, Philip, for a very good talk. We are running a bit late, and we're having panel discussion. So I would say that we start with the panel discussion now, and then if there are some questions to Philip, they can be asked during the panel as well. So before doing that, I would like to hand over the leadership of this session to Steffi Friedrich, who is from Acumen IST, innovation organization from Brussels, right? Yes. And those of you that have not met Steffi before, I think you will have a nice experience here. She's really been a very strong person working on, let's say, innovation ecosystems. She was also starting the NIA, the Nanoscale Industrial Association, years ago. So I am very happy that you like to share this session. So.
Thank you very much, Lars. That was a very kind introduction. Thank you for the kind words. If some of you out of the corner of your eye saw me standing up already a while ago, that was to signal to Philippe that he was overrunning a little bit. He did actually try to answer all of the questions we had already scoped with the panel, but you're still going to be asked those. So my first task is to actually introduce our, and we've spared no expenses to get you the best possible list of experts to sit on the panel here. What we are going to do is we're not going to have them come up with big statements and slides, so we're going to introduce them to you so that you know where they're coming from, what their background is, and out of which sort of background they may want to comment on the AMI2030 initiative, and also what sort of questions you might want to ask them. And then we are going to have a little direct commenting from these experts directly to the AMI2030 initiative. And then we're going to open the last half an hour. We are going to, do we have as much as that? Yes, we're running, yeah. And the last half an hour, we're going to open to the floor. So if you would like to already think of some questions here, it's going to be a lot of time for you in the last 30 minutes to ask your questions. We had prepared for this, being told that we would be throwing microphones. So we have hired for you a professional thrower in the form of Gemma, and now she's told she has to run instead of throw. So she is going to hand the microphone around, just signal to her in case you want to ask a question, and we're going to keep some tabs as to who needs to be given the microphone. Thank you, Gemma. So I now need a slideshow with statements for each one of our panelists. Do we have that ready?
It's coming.
It's coming up. Super. That's spooky. I can actually see what he's doing up here. You can only see it once it's there. Super. Thank you. Awesome. So first one up, lady first, is Monique Grunewald. She is working for the Dutch Institute of Public Health and Environment, RIVM, in the Netherlands. She's by training a biomedical scientist and specialized in toxicology. And she is, in her current role, she has two hats on here today. One is that she is chairing the Working Party for Manufactured Nanomaterials at the OECD, and the other one is that she is a member of the Malta Initiative Board, about which we heard already in one of the breakout sessions this morning. So Monique, if I could ask you to take your seat on the panel. And Monique's very strong, and underlining what we said before about her vita, is essentially that she plays a big role in standardization. So her statement is that standardization and harmonization of validated test methods, that's what the OECD is doing, for safety and sustainability testing of materials is critical for societal and regulatory utilization of new materials. To ensure timely identification and development of test methods for AMI2030 products, harmonization and standardization needs to be a coordinated and integral part of all product innovation in the AMI2030 initiative. There's going to be a comment on that one. The next one we have already seen, and one would say needs no further introduction, but he's going to get one anyway, is Peter Dröll, who is sorry, did we not clarify the sequence with you? Is this a this is a surprise as who is up next, yeah? Okay. So he is Director for Prosperity at DG RTD, and he's building on obviously what you heard in the previous session. Research made Europe strong in advanced materials. And we need to take a big step together for people, planet, and prosperity to reach zero pollution, circularity, and traceability with the next generation of materials. Common objectives, the power of computing, good tools for collective intelligence, and trusted fora for collaboration are the criteria for success. And by background, Peter is a lawyer, but has been working in innovation and science for quite a while now. Philippe Jacques. Let me just introduce at least the Vita, and so we know what Philippe is here for. We know he speaks for the Advanced Materials Initiative, which he is actually coordinating, but he is by education a chemical engineer. He worked for a while at Solvay, so there is an industry background in that as well, and he is actually seconded to head both the EMIRI, Energy Materials Industrial Research Initiative of the EU, and he is the Secretary General of BPAR, the Battery European Partnership Association. So there's a lot of materials and energy materials in there. And then we have Jerry Kinneret, who you know probably as the head of the graphene flagship, which was started since 2013, and which actually I believe you initiated. And his background is in electrical engineering and theoretical physics, and he's a professor at Chalmers University. And Jerry's statement is that disruptive innovation, we were waiting for that word to be thrown in here, disruptive innovation is based on new materials, requires collaboration across disciplinaries and geographical boundaries. A partnership bringing together key players from the industrial and academic communities in this field is the most efficient way to convert research results to prosperity in Europe. Next one up, and there's not many left, Jaroslav Pikarski. He is our member state representative from Poland. Jaroslav has a degree in mechanical engineering focused on numerical methods, and he has been sitting on a number of program committees, both the one in Horizon Europe and now the one in, the one in Horizon 2020 and now the one in Horizon Europe, specifically for Cluster 4. And his statement is that he does believe that opportunities created with the support of the AMI2030 initiative will help to build the economy based on research and innovation across Europe and facilitate access to EU value chains for actors from all EU regions, resulting in balanced twin, green and digital transformation of EU industries in line with the Green Deal objectives. Jaroslav. And then last but not least, and this goes out with a bang, our line of speakers, because Peter Ruczynski is our industry representative, and not only is he deeply involved in industry, he is also coming from the digital side. He's working for Dassault Systems, SolidWorks, and he is by degree a plastics engineer. And he says about himself that he is helping clients and laypersons understand and realize the benefits of plastics in circularity. And his statement is that regarding the digitization of materials development, we strongly believe that the virtual universe we make possible will be a key enabler for our customers and the world to imagine, design, and test the radically new products, materials, and manufacturing processes needed in tomorrow's more sustainable economy. So that is our panel. And what I would like to do is I would, first of all, need to get out of the way. Peter, are you sure you want to sit that far away? Otherwise, I would take that one there. And then, otherwise, you would also like to answer the question. Okay, good. So I'm going to get my notes ready as well. And I think I'm going to start off with also what part of my background is a little bit without wanting to necessarily push that here, but also because Monique was the first one to be asked up on stage. Your job is a lot about safety and sustainability. And I do wonder, in all that you're looking back upon, which is 15 plus years of nanosafety research in specifically nanomaterials, what advice do you have to give to the AMI2030 initiative, specifically when it comes to setting this up now? You would have been at that stage with the nanomaterials and nanosafety community a while ago. So what advice do you have? And second, how do you see the knowledge from the nanosafety community live on in now moving further towards advanced materials, which is a much more general theme, isn't it? You will need a mic.
Very simple question, Steffi, but no. First, thanks a lot for inviting me also to this panel. And yeah, I don't know who to give my advice to, but just look around. And yes, at the OECD Working Party on Manufactured Nanomaterials, you probably heard about it, but about 300 to 400 scientists and experts work on a very high level, I would say, and have shown lately that they are really in a global leading position in developing approaches, harmonized and standardized approaches for governance and risk governance. So in that sense, I think it would be wonderful if the lessons that we have learned by doing this for the past 15 years could be passed on to AMI, of course. So what is a very specific thing for the OECD in general is that this, I think, it's still there. The approaches that we develop, they fall under the mutual agreement of data. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but the countries that are affiliated to the OECD, that they agreed together that all data that is gathered, experimental data that is gathered under the test guidelines that are harmonized, delivered by those countries, are accepted worldwide under the same agreement. So that means that if data is gathered in the US for regulatory purposes, these data are also accepted in Europe, Japan, Australia. So as you can imagine, that will save a lot of costs and animal testing. So I think this is an important part of the strength of the OECD. So besides that, we also have a platform where we can really talk about emerging issues, we call it, because there's a broad knowledge base of people around from all over the world. We are able to put knowledge on the table and also recognize trends on different emerging issues. So in summary, I think the lessons that we have learned is that we have to know that the test guidelines that we developed for chemicals are not applicable for materials. So we have started developing test guidelines for nanomaterials, but that doesn't mean that they're all fit for purpose already for the new materials coming up. I think it's very important to recognize that especially the physical characteristics of materials, they determine the interaction with their environment. So how they interact with the human body, how they interact with the environment, we are still learning there. So if we want to avoid having harmful effects for the future, for our environment, and be intrinsic sustainable, this is really something to take care about. And I think the structural exchange that we do with knowledge builds a strong community that we learned from. So I think that would also be a part of my advice. And last but not least, I would say that the collaborative approach that we have also builds societal trust. And as you all know, if you really want innovations to succeed, societal trust is, I would say, a pivotal part of this. So that would be, in summary, some of the highlights there.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, Jacques, you can, sorry, Philippe, you can, we're going to do this again. You can answer immediately or you can leave it to later if you feel challenged.
I think that indeed we are fully aware of the benefits really of the work that has been done under this OECD test guidelines, and really that how important this is really to be considered. And indeed we are really, you know, in AMI we want to be very inclusive and really to build, again, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want really to build on all the existing initiatives and really to more to bring them together and to better work at the interface. You know, for materials, interfaces is very key, and definitively we want to do the same with the different communities. And AMI2030, the Malta initiative and what we have been doing in the OECD is definitively one of the important aspects to be considered and to be part of the global initiative. Yes, for sure.
Thank you. Monique, if you don't mind handing your microphone over to Jerry, because there is a question coming up.
Thank you.
Exactly. So you probably guess what's coming next. We've spoken about nanomaterials. We've spoken about the experience that people had in building big initiatives that were very much material focused, let it be health and safety, sustainability focused, or now going much bigger with AMI2030. You have built this very successfully for graphene, a single material, very focused, admittedly with lots of applications. What do you think you could offer as an advice as to what to take care of at this stage? Maybe because it is something that you learned as a hard lesson, or it is something that worked specifically well for you in setting up the graphene flagship?
Okay, let me start by correcting one common misunderstanding. Our initiative is called the Graphene Flagship, but it should really be called Graphene and Related Two-Dimensional Materials Flagship, but it's too much of a mouthful. So there are about 6,000 of these two-dimensional materials, of which maybe a few dozen have been studied to any degree. One thing that I think is very important, connects very closely to what Monique was saying, that the safety, health and safety issues are absolutely crucial. That's actually the only thing that we foresaw that could have put a game stopper. Now we have studied a lot of that, for instance, using with the OECD test guidelines, which don't always work for two-dimensional materials. And we have seen that there are no major concerns in that area, but that is absolutely crucial for any new material. You need to make sure that it is safe for the consumer and also for the worker who is involved in producing them. Another thing connects to what Philip was saying, and also this apparent contradiction that a lot of people have said that things take time, and I fully agree, new things take time. And then there are sometimes a different set of people who say that we need to do things fast. But those of us who have some background in computer science know that there's a solution to that. We can parallel process. We can start thinking about the standardization issues, the health and safety issues in parallel with developing the technologies. And that, I think, is one thing that we have learned in the Graphene Flagship, that we can't do things sequentially. We have to do these kinds of issues in parallel. So now I have already managed to forget your question, but I think I have answered something.
You have already offered a lot of advice to Philippe for the AMI2030 initiative. But let me follow up on one thing that I noticed when your statement was up, and that was specifically, and I don't know if we can actually, maybe I should be doing that. Or do you want to do the DJ? Yeah, because I have two things to, thank you. So one thing specifically that that stopped me for a moment is that you do mention industrial and academic communities, but we have heard already at the session this morning when people were talking about the safe and sustainability initiative. You also heard Monique speaking now in the remit in which she is working at the OECD WPMN and the Malta initiative. These are all initiatives that are very much driven by the regulator, sometimes more with the rule book in hand and sometimes as an initiative as to how to do things better. So where is the third community here in your...
Oh, we are interacting very closely with them. We have had joint workshops with the European Chemical Agency, for instance. We've been quite active working together with the EU Observatory of Nanomaterials. We've had quite some impact on the very definition of nanomaterial. The initial definition drafts were such that, say, CVD-grown graphene, which is maybe 30 centimeters wide or could be 2 meters long if you wish, was classified as a nanomaterial because it's admittedly very thin in one direction, but it's not really a nanomaterial in the sense that you don't accidentally inhale a 30 centimeter diameter disk of material. And also some of the definitions that were used were more geared towards more conventional materials and not so much to these ultra-thin structures. Sort of the same kind of issues as with the OECD test guidelines, that some things can be adopted, some things we see maybe need to be further developed or refined. And that has to happen together with the relevant bodies that are in charge of those kinds of issues.
Excellent, thank you. If I may, Peter Udzinski, sorry. You heard a lot about what the initiative what the AMI2030 initiative would like to achieve. You heard what those that have done similar initiatives or initiatives that are supporting larger material family investments for driving the research arena of Europe forward, what all of those are offering as things that have been learned. Digitalization hasn't been mentioned once. It is, however, something that I believe we have very strongly implemented now in AMI2030. We are looking at, but I do feel that is where we can at the moment offer the least support from something that we already know. Yet you are sitting here and it is all that you do and it is what your company do, with a specific challenge as to we also need to make it sustainably. So how do you achieve that?
Okay, well, first, I'd like to say thank you for having me here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm humbled, honored, and excited to be here. And I would say everything that I've heard, by the way, I'm as new as it gets to such an event and most of these initiatives, but every word that I've heard, I think since the first presentation this morning has been music to my ears, based on my background and what my company does. If you're not familiar with Dassault Systems, where you could say fundamentally a large engineering software company, by the way, I'm not here to sell anything. I like to say that if you don't know of us, the mode of transportation you took to get to this event was probably designed and manufactured using Dassault Systems software. And you can Google us, you can go to our website and check into all of that. My personal background is plastics engineering, and specifically injection molding and injection molding simulation and thermoplastics. In fact, one of the main things I'm working on right now is engaging with the world's leading plastics manufacturers. These are, you probably all know, these large diversified chemical companies which are polymerizing plastics materials. I engage with them in an effort to get the material data required to run our injection molding simulations. So I think the material data issue is probably one of the same that you're all facing here. The good news is that a lot of these companies are willing and freely collaborating with us to provide their material data for simulation. And I don't know if that sounds like a big deal or not, but I know when I have a client who's ready to run a simulation so that they can basically design a better product that's more sustainable, conforms or aligns with the objectives and goals of a plastic circular economy, if that simulation data is readily and freely available, it allows that customer to achieve their goals and objectives, basically. If that's the good news, the bad news is that some of these companies, as you can imagine, are not unwilling to collaborate with us, but let's say they're somewhat reluctant. Reluctant because it's been mentioned, I think, a handful of times this morning, the cost of the testing, the cost of this material testing, sometimes the intellectual property considerations of the material data. If one company is paying for the testing to get this material data, they don't want a competitor to basically grab the data and run with the data. But an initiative like the AMI2030, I think, gives a guy like me and my company leverage to go back to these big plastics manufacturers and say, hey, look, I know you want to protect your data, but really for the good of all, it's better if this data becomes more freely available. Having said all of that, when we talk about digitalization and sustainability, we have software products today that can be used to measure the environmental impact of any product that our clients are developing. And it's not just, we say now, not just about carbon footprint, for example, but if I use the simple example of let's say I'm going to make a plastic coffee cup. Starting with the raw material, what goes into the material that's chosen for that application, depending on the features of the application, the wall thickness, how much material is used in the application, going into manufacturing, how will this thing be manufactured, where will it be manufactured, even what's the impact on the humans that are in those manufacturing environments, all the way through to when this product is in its useful service life, what happens to it on a daily basis? How many times is it used per day? How many times does it get washed per day? What kind of resources is it using for that? Before that, how is the thing distributed? Is it coming by ship, by truck, by train? All the way through to the end of its useful service life, then what happens to it? Does it enter the solid waste stream, or does it go back around in the circle? So given that we have that software today, we just introduced this product just over a year ago. Of course, it relies heavily on material data. By the way, this can be any material, not just plastics, metals, ceramics, composites, chemical substances, you name it. So again, when we talk about digitalization and sustainability, I think we have enabling technology to make all of that happen. And then even going beyond all of that, we have products that can be used to do atomic and molecular modeling and developing new materials, and then also using that information or data to determine what the impacts of an existing material or a new material might be on its product life cycle, even to the point where we're already doing some of this today, where we can, for example, eliminate testing on animals because we can do this in a virtual world. For decades, Dassault Systems has been doing virtual crash testing with automobiles, let's say, for example. So we eliminate the development and manufacture of physical prototypes to do physical crash testing. We do that all virtually. And I could go on and on, as you could imagine, for quite some time, but just to tell you where we're going, one of Dassault's visions is to be able to simulate the human body just like we can simulate an automobile or an airplane today. In fact, we have a working commercial version of software we call the Living Heart. And this is software which is used today at Boston Children's Hospital, one of the premier children's hospitals in the world. They use our Living Heart technology to, let's say, to practice or to stage every cardiac procedure that's done at their hospital, so that when it comes time for the operation, they minimize the time that the patient is open, and they also minimize or eliminate altogether mistakes that might be made during the operation. So we have that. That's commercial software in use today. We have a prototype of what we call the living brain. Might sound crazy, but Dassault is actually working on creating a model of the human brain that can be used to run various simulations. So I know that was very long-winded, and I hope
Thank you. No, you definitely answered all of the questions. You also made a very nice introduction and hand over to the third party at these tables, and that is the regulatory and government community. So if you could just hand the microphone down to Jaroslav while I'm formulating my question. And that is, we heard a lot about what can be done and what is already being done by the initiatives on the workflow of the people who are doing this, who are working very hard on it. We also heard as the last statement here, something that digitally can already be done. However, we do know that a lot of these things are only as good as they're accepted in the regulatory community. But we also hear that we would like to see all of this happening and coming together, but it's all very complex. I mean, we are speaking about a big initiative here. We are speaking about something that looked like the humdinger of initiatives, i.e. the flagship, the graphene flagship, now offering its support to something that is probably going to be even bigger because it is addressing even more factors. But we're not talking about the money in the room. I guess we're not talking about, but feel free to mention a sum and to start haggling here between Philippe and Peter, if you like. I'll come back to that while you are thinking about that number. But what role do member states play? Because a lot of this says Europe. Even your statement says, can you do the DJ again? Thank you. Says a lot about Europe. So where do you see the role of a specific member state and specifically you here?
Okay, I can say Europe is these are member states. It's a member states. So it's a group of states that agree for common goal. That's why the Commission is not the opposition to member states. It's a place where the interest of particular member states are gathered, and a kind of summary is proposed to all to be implemented for common money. So that's why member states really have a crucial role in preparing all strategies, because it's not the result of, say, ideas of several or single or several Commission officers. It's an effect of long-term process, and that we can summarize in 2 words: dialogue and co-creation. So that's why really before, say, any idea of any strategy of the Commission is presented, before it's presented for public consultation, a number of programming conferences are conducted. Also, a number of more or less formal consultation with member states, but also with the community are held. That's why really it's a process with a number of actors. And that's why, say, I'm using the word Europe to express the community, not to express the organization like the Commission.
Thank you, that was clear. But last one in line that still doesn't save you, Peter. Question to you. Hang on, that's a very warm microphone now, I'm afraid. So we heard all of these things mentioned. And we also heard all morning words like Critical Raw Materials Act, we heard Chemical Sustainability Strategy, we heard Green Deal, yet we have now one initiative that says we are materials and we want to address solutions in all of these, for specifically with materials. How are they going to do that? How is one body now going to fit into these various many initiatives and going to make sure that it stays one body instead of being pulled into different directions?
I see this question of one body coming back, and perhaps I need to start on the defensive, saying I'm not promoting here in pensée unique, that we all have to do one and the same thing. It's quite the opposite. I would like to, with that initiative, and yeah, you explained it very well. This collective dialogue, collective intelligence, co-creation, that of course helps us to align, to go into the same direction, while being open for everything else. So you can, beside that initiative, if you don't want to, you don't have to. You can do something else, do something disruptive. There is also, and you will get our support under the European Research Council or under the European Innovation Council. It will be open and bottom up. But look, really, what we heard this morning, I think everything tells us that we will benefit from putting disciplines, putting projects, putting ideas and heads together, and develop on our ambitions.
Thank you. I actually meant with the one body AMI2030. And not the Commission, but it fits as well. So my concern in what I'm hearing here is that we have this bottom-up initiative that finds itself not in one initiative in the Commission, but it finds itself in answering a little bit to the Critical Raw Materials Act, a little bit to the Safety and Sustainability Strategy, a little bit to the Green Deal. And I would hate to see that it is left to the people who are then doing the work in AMI2030 to figure out who they need to talk to and who they are addressing at the time.
Okay, so for me, AMI2030 is a great initiative. And you've seen the figure, 361 organizations. So in a very short period of time, based on a common agreement on what I find very compelling overall vision for the greater good. But of course, when it comes to the coordinated plan that I mentioned earlier, this is not going to be implemented by AMI2030. This is something we'll do in a governance setting with member states, stakeholders, foundations, and AMI2030.
Excellent, thank you. So having done, you can keep that, Peter. I'm sure there's going to be more questions. Having done one round, Philippe, are you missing something? Is there something that you had really hoped to get out of your colleagues here which they haven't said?
Well, I think that regarding to what Peter was mentioning, definitively, I think there is, it's not only black and white regarding sharing of data. Is it open or is it just restricted and company confidential? I think that we still need to find also the way to have the business models in place that really will allow a fair treatment and access to data, which is not only between these two very different options, open or restricted company confidential. I'm sure there are ways, and I know already there are some open innovation testbed, for example, who are working, applying this kind of approach from a business model point of view, which is really to deal with how the data will be kept confidential or will be open for, and it's also not only necessarily sharing data, but just having the data helping improving the models and by machine learning and things like that. So that's, I think, also a point where I see a lot of possible actions. Regarding to what Jari was saying, well, we started working together and talking quite a lot for the last weeks, and so we have decided to build and to join forces together. So to have really the graphene flagship community contributing really to building what we want to do in AMI. So about your question, what are really the lessons learned and what we should take over? We are not going to take only the lessons, we are going to take the people in the initiative so that really we are sure that we will be able to build on really what has been achieved so far by the graphene flagship, and that, well, we feel it would not make sense really to keep two separate communities working in parallel. So really we want to bring all the forces together. And regarding what Jaroslav was saying, I think maybe one important point is also that we find a way to better align between the national and the EC programs, so that really we are able to leverage on at both levels. I think we have to keep in mind that indeed there is a very important contribution and regarding the funding proportion that the member state are putting a lot of money also on advanced materials. So we need to find a way not only to focus on the money coming for funding coming from the Commission, but just to make sure that we will be able to leverage on both aspects. One example, again, coming back to digital data spaces, the Material Digital initiative in Germany, for example, the Diadem project in France are now built separately, and I hope they will be talking together. I really would like that we provide also an opportunity for all the national initiatives dealing with data spaces really to bring just to, not necessarily to exchange or to share the data, but at least to provide really the appropriate blueprint so that the data would be much more interoperable and accessible from one to the other. And that, I think, that can be done very efficiently by a European level initiative like AMI.
Excellent, thank you. We are opening this to the floor now. I keep looking at the screen, but I don't think we have any online questions. Surely we have some burning questions in the room. There's...
My question. One question I'm wrapping around Monique, and I think Peter may be able to help, and perhaps also Peter, you from the cell. You mentioned about nanotoxicology, etc., etc. I consider nano as drug. Regulatory position in the Europe is changing for medical devices and drugs. Are there any simulated versions available for human body which would tell that this particular, say, graphene, let's talk about graphene, is not going to cause cancer, or the dichalcogenides are not going to cause cancer? Do we have data for nanoplastics, for example? We know from pathology, I work in the university and know from cancer pathology that since 1960s, as the plastics have entered our lives, the number of cancer cases in the world has increased. And people find cancer prevalences, dissemination, plastic dissemination in all kinds of things, okay? So that's question number one. And my second question is all related to digital. Is there a way to design future digital devices which can be non-addictive, especially for children?
That covers quite a range. Monique, would you like to start answering? Sorry, we should have, yeah.
I leave the second question up to somebody else. But it's a very interesting one, though. But the first one about, was really about toxicological properties of materials and how can we make sure that for the future we don't end up with properties that we don't want. That's how I interpret your question. So that's what we call safe and sustainable by design by now, and that's currently being prepared and implemented in Europe, for example, by a framework that is being developed by the JRC. But it's about safety and sustainability assessment. So how can we do the right testing to understand that a chemical that you develop is safe and sustainable? And this is really something that we are learning at the moment, and how we are doing that with virtual methodology, that's, so as far as I know, still under development. So I know from some programs, they're developing a virtual human being, something like my right neighbor said about the heart. I know there are more developments who want to connect organs on a virtual level. But yeah, it's not like that we at this point in time have all the knowledge to know for certain how to design materials so they will be completely safe and sustainable. We have knowledge, but it's still under development, I would say. And why I have the mic, Steffi? Can I say a little bit more about the lessons learned? Because I thought maybe there was more discussion maybe on the advices towards AMI, because the experience that we have with co-creation, I heard dialogue and co-creation and initiative from bottom up, actually said by a lot of panel members here. By the time that we discovered in Europe that we were not able to comply with the regulatory needs because the test guidelines development causes so much time and so much knowledge development, there was an initiative by the German authority to develop something from bottom up. That's the Malta initiative. And that's what you introduced. But this initiative has shown to be tremendously improvement towards the development of test guidelines. But we also realized that you need real research to do that, to understand how materials interact with their environment. It's not something like you just make a test guideline. There's a long way before you can make such a test guideline. So I wanted to say that the experience that we have with the Malta initiative in a multi-stakeholder environment could be a really good basis to build on also for the AMI and to integrate knowledge as much as we have in this initiative.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for this very important point. I hand the mic. Maybe we can give that one back to Gemma for the audience, and I hand this one to Peter for the non-addictive toys.
Check. No. No, I'm assuming that was maybe a rhetorical question.
Can you help me read these two?
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree. It's happening now. I think what I can speak to, and keep in mind, I'm a plastics guy at heart. A lot of this is not my field of expertise, but I can also tell you, even if you're familiar with Dassault Systems, what you may not know about Dassault is that as a result of an acquisition that we did in 2019, before the pandemic hit. By the way, I don't think this was any stroke of genius at the time. It turns out that we acquired a company by the name of Medidata, based in the US. This is a company which is making software used to manage and track patient clinical trials. It turns out as a result of that acquisition that 60% of the clinical trials that were run for COVID vaccines across, it's Moderna, AstraZeneca, Pfizer, the Chinese one at least those four, 60% of the trials were run using now Dassault Systems software as a result of that acquisition. Now, again, not a stroke of genius, because I think even our senior management would admit that they didn't see COVID coming, although they probably saw a pandemic coming. Right? I don't think it was news to anyone that sooner or later a global pandemic was going to occur. Anyways, that's just some background, but I think maybe the more important thing relevant to the question is that what was another reason Dassault made that acquisition? It's because of that patient data. And our CEO has stated we want to get to the point where between our atomic and molecular modeling software and now this patient clinical trial software, as well as our decades of general simulation software development, we want to get to the point where we can develop patient-specific pharmaceuticals. So let's say we're all inflicted with the same disease in here, and we need a particular drug to treat that disease. Well, I get one version of that, you get another, you get another, you get another, you get another, based on your makeup, basically. So does it also relate to let's say the avoidance of cancer? Perhaps, but we've now exhausted my knowledge on that subject, but gives you an idea of what we're working on.
Thank you. We actually had just now a question from the online audience, and the gentleman, I think Roy Brooks or something like that. The problem is the screen has gone black. Lars was so kind to help me with ticking the right settings, and now it's all gone, Lars, I'm afraid. But yeah, it was the battery. And no, there it is again. Thank you. Trust the lawyers on the panel. Thank you. So indeed, Roy Brooks is asking, would the panel care to comment on bio-based materials within their personal remit? Who would like to make a start, who has some background on bio-based materials? Maybe you would like to start, Philippe, because this is...
I have no particular background on bio-based materials, but what I can only say is that bio-based materials are also included in the scope of AMI2030. We don't want really to categorize or to limit really the scope of the initiative to certain types of materials. So these one are also, of course, covered.
But I'll be brief. It's simply, if you are to replace fossil materials with something renewable, bio-based materials are key. Second, we have a very important European action on it, on the bio-based economy more general. It's actually quite a substantial joint undertaking we do with industry. And we see that the market perspective for bio-based solutions are huge, and we still can learn from nature so much. Just one example, biomanufacturing. It's not just biomimicry, it's just combining IT and computing with material and engineering. And doing this with bio-based. So for me, it's a very, very strong potential, and Philippe already confirmed that it's part of the AMI scope.
Excellent, thank you. Peter, some burning answer to that one regarding digitalization, specifically for bio-based? Otherwise, we have a question from the audience. Okay, we have an audience question. Yes? Yeah.
It's working. Yes, it's working. Sorry. Hi, my name is Kerstin Johansson, and I'm a professor in integration of product and production development. So I have enjoyed the day, I can say, especially when we're coming to this digitalization. I'm doing research and education in the Swedish manufacturing mecca, if I could say like that. So I'm working a lot with small and medium-sized enterprises. And now when we come to this sharing data, and they are already skilled in manufacturing, and then we are adding all these new manufacturing or new technologies and new materials. Who own the information? Who own the knowledge? And how can they be competitive? Software interfaces, the compatibility, what do you say? Yes, you backtrack, you know what I'm meaning. So I see a lot of challenges here from an industrial perspective. And since I'm trying to learn the students to put the right questions, because if they can put the right questions, they will probably be able to analyze the results. So how do you see this from different perspectives?
Who would you like to have this?
From the software interface perspective, I would like to have the SO, who own the information knowledge, perhaps the guys there. Safety perspectives, of course, because putting in new materials in traditional machining, that will be a challenge. So I think, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. I think, Peter, you hinted on that one already in one of your early statements. So in Europe, we have, you will be familiar with that, we have this FAIR initiative, which is all about findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability of data. But every one of these letters causes their own problem, and we need to arrive at all of them working in order to essentially provide you with what you can then work clever software about, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes to material data that my clients would need, it's not so much that my company needs it; it's that our customers need it. If I talk about engineering simulation, so structural simulation, computational fluid dynamics, injection molding simulation, EMAG, you name it, the list goes on and on. The historical approach, by the way, not just by us, but by pretty much every simulation software company, has been to leave the onus or the responsibility of the material data on the customer. So we basically say collectively in our industry, look, we basically provide the solver and the meshing technology. If you need material data, you go out and find it yourself. That we see that rapidly changing. Now I can speak about injection molding simulation. The historical approach has been that the software company actually provides the data, because with plastics injection molding simulation, I like to use the example, I can take polycarbonate, make it 5 different colors, the same base material, 5 different colors. Now I might have 5 different materials that react differently under processing conditions. They flow differently, and when they're molded into finished parts, they might have actually different molded part properties. For structural simulation, again, the historical approach, leave that up to the responsibility of the customer. We see that rapidly changing in that these are complex properties that we're looking for, number one. The data that's collected might have to be treated or massaged in different ways depending on the type of simulation being done. So for example, is it high speed versus low speed? Is it fatigue versus simple basic structural analysis? And in my engagements with these plastics manufacturers, I'm now engaged with about 80 of them worldwide. Pick the top 80 in the world, those are the ones that we're talking to. I actually have some of them proactively asking me if they can provide the data for structural simulation to get it into the hands of the customer. So this is, even 5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined this happening. Now I think there's a collective realization in the industry that the material manufacturers, who in this case are the keepers of the data, they own the intellectual property rights, they're the ones paying for the testing. They realize that if they want our mutual customers to get the most accurate simulation results possible, they have to better control the data that's, basically the quality and the currency of the data that's making it into the hands of the end-use customers. I hope that answers your question.
Monique, I think that also had a regulatory aspect, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because if we talk about data from a safety perspective, I would like to discriminate between data that we collect for understanding the behavior of materials, and that's more like, university research, so this is a different type of research. But if I talk about research for regulatory purposes, I think we started about 20 years ago to develop at least templates and exchange information to work towards standardized techniques. But we recognized also that data that was collected at the start was not so accurate, I would say. So most of the data that was collected in the old days is not very useful anymore. But right now, there are in this community, in the safety community, templates implemented, standardized methods, databases. Most of them are all connected to work towards reuse of data for regulatory risk assessment, for example. But only these data are of value if we use the right test methods again. So, and this is the point. If they are not adapted for those materials that we will develop for the future, the data that you collect with the test guidelines are useless. So this is really what we still need effort for. The basic infrastructure is there. The people most of them are trained. We have advanced FAIR network actually initiated the past 2 years in Europe. So there's a network, that's a growing network. So if you are interested, please go to this website and register yourself too. So there is a basic infrastructure.
Thank you. And I do think there is one more question. Indeed, I'm going to give you, while we're giving sorry, I know you don't need the microphone. So while Philippe is talking, we're going to have one more question in the room. Thank you. Yeah.
Do you hear me? Yeah, okay, now. No, what I wanted to stress is that indeed data today, I think it's the gold mine. It's really, we need to be able to better exploit data. I think I really invite you to have a look at the strategic roadmap that was issued by AMI2030 that you will find on our website about really how we see really the needs regarding how to really manage data and how to better connect the data from the material development side with all the different other dimensions along the production value chain, from really the production to the manufacturing and the reuse. There are indeed a lot of potential there, and still a lot of things to do. I think now we have the tools, we have the computers' capacity to manage this. We still need to build the Esperanto that will really make us able to exchange easily between all these data, and also, of course, to be able to manage it in a way that will really also take into consideration the concern of industry, not to lose really the knowledge, the know-how. But I'm sure that there are room for work in that direction. Yeah.
Thank you, Philippe. So we have one question there and one last warning. If you have another quick question after that one, we are going to close. And another one there, because we're taking those two. Tom.
Okay. Given the idea that Safe by Design can especially be focused and developed with regard to advanced materials, because most of these materials need a functionalization step. And during the functionalization, you could optimize for whatever type of efficiency or environmental friendliness you could build into that material. At the same time, we also see that most of the knowledge which is currently in Europe available that we could utilize is actually tox data on the nanochemicals to be utilized for Safe by Design for those advanced materials. We do have a nano commons, so that means that the data of these projects is shared in a uniform setting and a codec, so it can be used in machine learning as well, so it's not only human operatable. Could Safe by Design, and I'm talking to Peter Rushinsky, could such a knowledge design be based on that level of data to create a system of Safe by Design as a support system? Or is it still way beyond the horizon?
As you were formulating your question, I thought there's no way this question's going to be for me. It's not a joke. I don't know, but I think it's possible. I think. Yeah.
I'm asking this because this is more of timing is of the essence, as we have discussed here over and over. The Nanosafety cluster has been operating for 15 years. Currently, there's no nano anymore in the funding for the future. So we have a problem that we have a collective of around about 1,000 scientists in Europe, which are very well educated and formulated in this field of work. But as there is no lifeline for the future, this capacity is going to decline rapidly. So I would like to see either, can we salvage that knowledge into a system, or should we continue the network, or should we do both? What is in your experience the best?
Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind is I have some colleagues that I think that we could connect with in our, it's a brand that we call Biovia. These are the people that do the atomic and molecular modeling as well as lots of other stuff. If there's, so I've got to believe if there's any knowledge and know-how that we have within our company or existing technology which could be leveraged in this case, I think it's I think it's within that brand, that group of people. And that's about the extent of my knowledge on that, but I think I'd be happy to, take that up offline and make some connections and see what we can do.
Okay. Thank you. And we take one last question before we're closing the panel discussion before the well-deserved coffee break.
Sorry, I came a little bit late, but I followed your introduction. The documents which have been produced by some excellent people in Europe are fantastic. I'm just wondering what strategy will be used in order to come up with the innovation of the new materials. And what is innovation of the new materials? I think that at a meeting I was with semiconductors and the chips and so on in Europe. I can tell you, we don't have the materials available. We cannot make the nano semiconductors we want to have. It will be very difficult to have them in the next future. Who will make them? Who will do that? In the United States, enormous big programs are going on in the field. But don't forget China. I'm still professor at the Tsinghua University, the MIT from China, and I can tell you what is going on there. Is Europe prepared in that program, what they put together, to put a kind of a European strategy in order to get to the innovation of new materials? It is not sufficient to work together in laboratories here and there and to have a little bit of collaboration from A to B. No, we have to do something different. And we really should think very careful. What is the new strategy which should be developed in Europe in order to satisfy the needs for our European industry in the future? I just say that for the semiconductors, I was in that meeting, and there was a big debate in that meeting that we cannot do it, we cannot make the materials, we will not have the materials, it will be difficult to have them, and that is sure. In order to have, one was talking there, 0.5 nanometer semiconductor materials, I think, is a dream. But we need those in order to keep Europe competitive for the next 10 years. And if I look a little bit about the American programs on materials, I am very surprised about the revolutions. And for the first time, probably in the US, it is as well the Department of Defense as other departments and the Nanoscience Foundation, they are working probably for the first time together. New materials, innovative materials are vitally needed in a number of fields. And that these programs have already started in very important competitors from Europe. That's China and America. And I can tell you, I'm also sitting in international meetings on materials with OECD and with the Davos meeting, etc., etc. And I'm a little bit surprised what Europe will do. It's a good document which has been prepared, but I think Europe should think, what strategy should be set up? What is the materials program? Not the materials program what Professor Droll was presenting, which is very interesting. But what is the strategy? How we go to do that? And I think we have to reflect very deeply. Otherwise, Europe will go maybe not on the level of China, of America, but maybe we'll have difficulties with another number of countries, like in a meeting which I attended with the President von der Leyen about what is the place from Europe in the future. It will not be anymore just behind China and America together with Japan. It will be on a lower level. And I think materials play a vital role. And I think in Europe, we don't know how to do it. And I think it is time, really, to reflect on that topic.
Thank
My name
you.
is Marcel van de Voorde. I'm professor at Delft University, but I'm also one of the founders of IMEC. And at the same time, I was at Max Planck. I preferred the first European framework program, and I was also in the direction of CERN. Thank you.
Thank you for your excellent question, Marcel. We're losing people already. So if I could maybe give this to Peter first, and then give the very last word to close this panel, because we started with Philippe, to Philippe. Short if you want to still have people listening to it, please.
So thanks a lot for this very sympathetic provocation. I share your passion. I share your passion. And I do think that we are 6% of the world population. So we are punching well over our weight when we say we 25% of intellectual property, highly cited publications are from Europe. So I do also see a reason for concern. Keeping our current position will be very difficult and perhaps not even fair. So the richer the knowledge globally, the better also for all. This being said, I think we don't have to be too shy. We have taken the lead with the European Green Deal, which goes into all areas of our economy, where we take leadership and produce new business opportunities, where we also encounter social questions, which we need to take seriously. On materials, for this we need much longer. But I think if we have a target, if we have also the idea to go further, we have discussed, we are considering some instruments like a public-private partnership. We could consider infrastructures. If you think of what we are doing on semiconductors, you mentioned that, the CHIPS Act. Okay, we're running a bit behind the US, but we have a European CHIPS Act. It's about to be adopted. The trialogue starts next week. So if you look at the recent European Industrial Policy Project, the Net Zero Industry Act, that's quite substantial. So, but your question probably was that we need more to get it on the ground and to have it here. And I think that is something we should figure out together as part of the coordinated plan of action, as part of our European research area and innovation policy.
Thank you. Philippe, last word on that one.
Thanks a lot, because indeed your question is, I think you are summarizing everything in this question, and I can only invite you to join us for our next step. What we have done so far is mainly to engage the communities and to say, okay, we need to do something together. The next step is to set up the strategic research innovation agenda. That's exactly to touch your point, really. How are we going to make these innovative materials happen in Europe and possible in Europe? So that's indeed not by just scattering the funding on very small projects that we are going to achieve that. We need to think big. So this comes back to the question, how much money do we need? We need a lot. We need a lot. If really we want to achieve this ambition, we are talking about billions of euros that really we need to deploy the excellence center, the technology infrastructures, really to also to educate the people, to get the skills that really will make it possible, and also to really to choose our battles. What do we want to do? It's not to scatter the money along all over the different type of materials. We would get lost. But really to identify what are really the key technologies that will be really transforming and really being the disruptive technology that will make it happen. So more than welcome. I hope you will join us for our next work on the strategic research innovation agenda.
Thank you. And we are here hosted by an excellent
and you know,
university.
that was my final word that I was planning to say. We need to make Europe attractive for talents and for industry to innovate in Europe.
Thank you.